welcome to Paranormal Pages. Tuck in and get ready for the true scary stories. Story 1. The Haunting Laughter. It had been a year since my daughter, Lily, drowned in the lake behind our house. The sorrow was a persistent shadow that darkened every corner of my existence. My wife, Anna, and I moved through the days like ghosts ourselves, our home a mausoleum of shattered dreams and unfulfilled hopes. But then the laughter started. It was a soft giggle at first, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably Lily's. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing cruel tricks on me, a desperate manifestation of grief. One evening, as I sat in Lily's room, surrounded by her untouched toys and clothes, I heard it again. Clearer this time. The unmistakable sound of my daughter's laughter. I froze, my heart pounding, every nerve on edge. I whispered her name, Lily. The room responded with silence, the laughter fading into the ether. I dismissed it as my imagination, the remnants of a broken heart refusing to accept the harsh reality. But the occurrences became more frequent. Anna, too, began to notice. She would pause in the middle of a chore, head tilted, listening. "Did you hear that?" she would ask, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. I nodded each time, feeling the chill of the unknown seep deeper into my bones. We started to avoid discussing it, the unspoken acknowledgement that our reality was warping into something neither of us could understand. One night, the laughter led me to the lake. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over the water, illuminating the spot where Lily had slipped beneath the surface. I stood there, the night air cold and still, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the shore. "Lily," I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, but I felt a presence, a lingering sadness that mirrored my own. Desperation drove me to seek answers. I began to research the history of our house and the lake. What I found was disturbing. Tales of children drowning, their laughter haunting the living, spanning back generations. The lake, it seemed, held a dark secret, a malevolent force that preyed on the innocent. I delved deeper, contacting local historians and even a paranormal investigator. They confirmed my worst fears. The lake was cursed, a portal for restless spirits. As the days turned into weeks, the laughter grew more insistent, more desperate. It echoed through the halls, filled the rooms, and wrapped around us like a shroud. Anna and I became prisoners in our own home, terrified to leave, yet even more terrified to stay. We argued more, the stress and fear eroding the last vestiges of our sanity. One night, as the laughter reached a fever pitch, I snapped. "What do you want from us?" I screamed into the darkness, my voice cracking. To my horror, the laughter stopped, replaced by a whisper. "Come to the lake," it said, the voice a chilling blend of Lily's and something far darker. I felt a cold hand grip my heart, and I knew that whatever awaited us at the lake, it would not be something we could easily escape. I turned to Anna, her face pale and drawn. "We need to go," I said, my voice hollow. She nodded, her eyes filled with a fear that matched my own. The path to the lake seemed longer that night, each step heavy with dread. The moon hung low, casting long, sinister shadows. As we approached the water, the surface began to ripple, as if something beneath was stirring. The laughter returned, louder and more twisted, filling the air with an otherworldly chill. And then we saw it, a figure standing in the water, a silhouette against the moonlight. It was Lily, or rather, what remained of her. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her laughter was a chorus of agony and sorrow. We stood frozen, our hearts pounding, as she beckoned us closer. "Hey, subscribe for more scary stories." Anna's grip on my hand tightened as we stood at the edge of the lake, paralyzed by the sight before us. Lily, or the ghostly semblance of her, floated just above the water's surface, her laughter now a discordant melody of grief and malice. The moonlight highlighted her ethereal form, making it painfully clear that this was no figment of our imagination. I felt a tug at my soul, a desperate need to reach out to her, but fear rooted me to the spot. "Lily," Anna whispered, her voice trembling. "Is that really you?" The apparition's eyes locked onto Anna's, and for a brief moment, the malevolence softened, replaced by a haunting sadness. But then the air grew colder, and the darkness around us seemed to deepen. A sudden gust of wind whipped around us, and Lily's form began to dissolve into the night. Before disappearing completely, her voice echoed one last time, "Help me." The police sent chills down my spine, and I knew we couldn't ignore this any longer. We had to uncover the truth behind our daughter's haunting and the lake's curse. The next day, we visited the local library, poring over old records and newspapers. We discovered a series of tragic drownings dating back to the 1800s. Each incident eerily similar: a child would drown, and soon after, their laughter would haunt the surviving family members. As we delved deeper, we found mentions of a local legend, a woman named Eliza, accused of witchcraft and drowned in the lake by the townspeople. Her spirit was said to have cursed the water, seeking vengeance through the lives of innocent children. We decided to seek help from the only person who might have answers, Mrs. Hawthorne, an elderly woman known for her knowledge of local folklore and the supernatural. Her house, nestled at the edge of the woods, exuded an air of mystery. Mrs. Hawthorne welcomed us with a knowing look, as if she had been expecting us. She led us to a dimly lit room, filled with ancient books and peculiar artifacts. "You've seen her, haven't you?" Mrs. Hawthorne's voice was raspy but firm. We nodded, and she sighed deeply. "Eliza's curse is powerful, but it's not unbreakable. To free your daughter and the other trapped souls, you must perform a cleansing ritual. But be warned, it will require great courage and sacrifice." She handed us a tattered book, its pages yellowed with age. Inside, we found the details of the ritual. We needed to gather specific items: a white candle, a piece of Lily's clothing, and a rare herb called moonshade. The ritual had to be performed at midnight, with both of us reciting the incantation while standing in the lake. The search for moonshade proved to be the most difficult. We combed through the dense forest, the shadows playing tricks on our minds. Just as despair began to set in, Anna spotted the delicate blue flower hidden among the underbrush. We gathered it carefully, our hearts pounding with both hope and fear. That night, as the clock struck midnight, we stood at the edge of the lake, the moon reflecting off the still water. The white candle flickered in the cool breeze, casting long shadows. We waded into the lake, the cold water rising up to our waists. Holding hands, we began to recite the incantation, our voices trembling but determined. As we chanted, the water around us began to ripple, and a low hum filled the air. The ghostly figures of children emerged, their faces a mixture of hope and sorrow. Among them, Lily's form appeared, her eyes pleading. We continued the incantation, our voices growing stronger, the air thick with tension. The candle's flame burned brighter, illuminating the darkness. Suddenly, the water erupted in a violent swirl, and the figures were pulled under. A piercing scream echoed through the night, followed by an eerie silence. We stood there, breathless, waiting. The surface of the lake gradually calmed, and a sense of peace washed over us. The laughter was gone, replaced by an overwhelming quiet. We turned to leave, our bodies exhausted but our hearts lighter. As we reached the shore, I glanced back at the lake one last time. In the distance, I saw a faint, ethereal figure of a woman, her expression one of sorrow and gratitude. She nodded slowly before fading into the mist, and I knew that Eliza's curse had finally been lifted. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy after that harrowing night at the lake. The house felt lighter, the air no longer thick with the oppressive weight of despair. Anna and I began to smile again, finding solace in the thought that we had freed Lily and the other children from their torment. But the reprieve was short-lived. It started with small things. The faint sound of footsteps in the hallway at odd hours, the flickering of lights even when there was no power outage. Anna dismissed it as our minds playing tricks on us, remnants of our trauma. But I knew better. One evening, as I was locking up for the night, I heard a familiar giggle. My heart clenched. It was Lily's laughter, softer now, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "Anna," I called, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. She came running, concern etched on her face. "It's happening again," I said, my voice shaking. She listened, but the house remained silent. I saw doubt flicker in her eyes, and it hurt more than I cared to admit. "Maybe you're just tired," she suggested gently. "It's been a long few weeks." I wanted to believe her, but the signs grew more evident. Objects would move on their own, shadows would dart across the walls, and the temperature would drop suddenly, chilling us to the bone. One night, as I lay in bed, a cold hand touched my shoulder. I bolted upright, gasping, but there was no one there. I felt a presence, though, a lingering sadness that clung to the room. We decided to consult Mrs. Hawthorne again. She welcomed us back, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sympathy and concern. The ritual should have ended the curse, she said, perplexed. But residual spirits can sometimes linger, especially if there's unresolved business. She suggested we perform another cleansing, this time focusing on our house. You need to let Lily know it's safe to move on, she advised. We prepared for the second ritual with a sense of weary determination. This time, we gathered items from our home that held special meaning to Lily, a favorite doll, a family photo, her beloved blanket. As midnight approached, we arranged the items in a circle in the living room and lit a white candle in the center. Holding hands, we began to recite the incantation Mrs. Hawthorne had given us. The room grew colder with each word, and the shadows seemed to deepen. As we chanted, I felt a tug on my heart, a sorrowful plea. "Daddy, Mommy," a soft voice whispered, and Lily's figure appeared before us, more solid than ever. Tears streamed down Anna's face as she reached out, but her hand passed through our daughter's form. "We love you, Lily," Anna sobbed. "It's okay to let go." Lily's eyes, filled with an ancient sadness, met mine. "I'm scared," she whispered. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. "We'll always be with you," I said. "You don't have to be afraid." Her form wavered, and the candle's flame flickered wildly. With a final, heartbreaking smile, Lily faded into the light, and the room grew still. For a moment, silence enveloped us, a heavy, profound silence. Then, the oppressive weight lifted, and the air warmed. We both sank to the floor, exhausted but relieved. The haunting presence was gone, leaving behind only memories and a bittersweet peace. The house felt truly empty for the first time, a stark reminder of the void left by our beloved daughter. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences ceased. The laughter was gone, the shadows no longer lurked, and the air felt lighter. We started to rebuild our lives, finding joy in small things, holding on to each other more tightly than before. Yet, there was an undeniable scar, a reminder of the supernatural brush with the past that had altered us forever. But as we settled into this new normal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching, waiting. It was a sensation that clung to me, especially at night, when the house was quiet and the memories of our ordeal loomed large. I dismissed it as paranoia, the after-effects of our trauma, until one night, I heard it again. The faintest echo of Lily's laughter, not from the lake, but from within our home. I bolted upright, heart racing, the shadows on the walls dancing eerily. This time, it wasn't just Lily. There were other voices too, a chorus of laughter that sent chills down my spine. I knew then that our ordeal was far from over. Something far more sinister had been awakened, and it was only a matter of time before it revealed itself. The next few days were a blur of fear and confusion. Anna and I moved through our routines like automatons, our minds consumed by the chilling realization that we were still being haunted. The voices grew louder, more insistent, each laugh a needle in our sanity. We needed answers, and we needed them fast. Desperation led us back to Mrs. Hawthorne one last time. She greeted us with a grim expression, as if she had already sensed our predicament. "The cleansing should have worked," she muttered, mostly to herself. "Unless..." She trailed off, her eyes widening with a revelation. "Unless the spirit isn't just your daughter. It could be something much darker, something using her memory to manipulate you." The words struck us like a physical blow. "What do we do?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Hawthorne looked at us with a mix of pity and resolve. "You must confront it directly. Show no fear. It thrives on your emotions. You need to find its source and destroy it." Armed with this daunting task, we returned home. The air felt thick with anticipation, the house almost alive with an unseen presence. We gathered our courage and prepared for the final confrontation. This time, we took every precaution, protective charms, salt lines, and holy water. We would leave nothing to chance. As midnight approached, we stood in the living room, the epicenter of the haunting. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to pulsate with a life of their own. The candle's flame flickered, casting eerie patterns on the walls. "We're not afraid," I declared, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "Show yourself." The room plunged into darkness, and a guttural laugh filled the air, unlike anything we had heard before. It was deep, malevolent, and filled with an ancient hatred. A shadowy figure emerged from the corner, its form shifting and writhing. It was neither human nor spirit, but something far more sinister. "You think you can banish me?" it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed through the room. "We demand you leave our home." Anna shouted, her voice fierce. The figure laughed again, and the air around us thickened with a malevolent energy. "This place is mine," it growled. "Your daughter was merely a vessel, a means to an end. And now, you will join her." The words sent a jolt of terror through me, but I held my ground. "We are not afraid," I repeated, though my heart hammered in my chest. We began to recite the incantation Mrs. Hawthorne had given us, our voices mingling in a desperate harmony. The entity recoiled, its form flickering as if struggling to maintain its presence. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and the room seemed to collapse in on itself. The figure surged forward, its dark tendrils reaching for us. I flung the holy water, and Anna scattered the salt, creating a barrier between us and the malevolent force. The entity howled in fury, its form distorting as it fought against the protective measures. In the midst of the chaos, I heard Lily's voice, faint but clear. "Daddy, you can do it." Her words filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. I stepped forward, holding the candle high, and spoke with all the authority I could muster. "In the name of all that is good, I command you to leave this place." The entity screamed, its form disintegrating into a swirling mass of darkness. The candle's flame flared brightly, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos ceased. The air warmed, and a profound silence fell over the room. The malevolent presence was gone. I sank to my knees, exhausted, but with a sense of triumph. Anna knelt beside me, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered, and for the first time, I believed her. We spent the next few days in a state of cautious relief. The house felt different, truly free of the oppressive weight that had plagued us for so long. We could finally grieve for Lily in peace, knowing her spirit was at rest. The laughter was gone, replaced by a serene silence. Our home was ours once more. Life slowly returned to normal. The scars of our ordeal remained, but they no longer defined us. We found new ways to honor Lily's memory, creating a garden in her name by the lake. It became a place of solace and remembrance, a testament to the love that had ultimately triumphed over the darkness. And so, we moved forward, carrying the lessons of our harrowing journey with us. The house stood as a silent witness to our resilience, a place where the light of our love had dispelled the shadows. We knew that the past would always be a part of us, but it no longer held us captive. We were free. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. Past Whispers. I first found it on a lazy Sunday afternoon. It was a day like any other, a brief respite from the chaos of work, with no plans beyond enjoying my coffee and perhaps tackling the pile of laundry that had grown taller than me. I was digging through an old trunk in the attic, searching for some childhood relics to reminisce over, when my fingers brushed against a brittle, yellowed envelope. Intrigued, I pulled it out, brushing off decades of dust that clung to its surface. Inside was a photograph. It was black and white, slightly faded, with the edges curling inwards. The image depicted a group of people gathered at what appeared to be a quaint little cafe. Their clothes and hairstyles suggested it was taken in the early 1900s. But what caught my breath and froze my heart was the unmistakable face among them, my own. I was seated at the center of the group, smiling warmly, though I had never seen these people or that place before. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned the photograph over, revealing a neatly written date, April 4th, 1923. A date long before I was born. How is this possible? I whispered to myself, my voice barely more than a shaky breath. The rational part of my mind insisted it must be a trick of the light, a misprint, or perhaps a distant relative who bore an uncanny resemblance. But deep down, I felt the stirrings of something much more sinister. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze, unable to tear my eyes away from the photograph. My attempts to dismiss it as a coincidence failed miserably. The more I looked at it, the more I felt a strange connection, as though the photograph was reaching out to me, pulling me into its sepia-toned world. It wasn't just the sight of my face, it was the familiarity of the setting, the warmth of the smiles, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves of the trees outside the cafe. It felt like a memory I couldn't quite grasp, a shadow at the edge of my mind. The next day, I took the photograph to an expert in antique photography, hoping for some rational explanation. The expert, a kindly old man with a thick German accent, examined it carefully. "It's authentic," he said, peering at me over his spectacles. The paper, the ink, the style, all typical of the early 1920s. "But this face, it is yours, yes?" I nodded, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "It looks like me, but it can't be. I wasn't born until 1985. The expert leaned back in his chair, a look of deep contemplation on his face. "There are stories," he began slowly, "of photographs capturing more than just an image. Sometimes, they capture a piece of the soul, a fragment of time. Perhaps this is one of those cases." His words sent a chill down my spine. I thanked him and left, but his explanation only added to my unease. As I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me, lurking just out of sight. Over the next few weeks, the photographs began to multiply. I found them in the most unexpected places, tucked into the pages of a library book, inside my mailbox, slipped under my door at work. Each one showed me in a different time, a different place, always surrounded by strangers. Each one bore a date long before my birth. The faces in the photographs seemed to change subtly each time, growing more distinct, more familiar. They haunted my dreams, their eyes following me, their whispers echoing in my ears. Desperation drove me to research the histories of the places in the photographs. I scoured old records, newspaper archives, and local histories, but found nothing that connected me to these mysterious images. The more I searched, the more elusive the answers became, like trying to hold on to mist. One night, as I was about to give up, I discovered a name, Clara Hartfield. She appeared in multiple photographs, always close to me, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Digging deeper, I found that Clara had been a prominent figure in her community, known for her involvement in various social causes, but her life had been cut tragically short in 1925 under mysterious circumstances. My blood ran cold as I realized that Clara's last known address was just a few blocks from my own home. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I set out that very night to find the place where she had lived, hoping it might hold the key to this unsettling mystery. Clara's house stood at the end of a narrow, tree-lined street. It was an old Victorian, its grandeur faded by time but still imposing. The windows were dark, and the garden overgrown with weeds and tangled vines. I stood at the gate, feeling an eerie sense of déjà vu. It was as if I had been here before, in another life. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the gate open, the rusted hinges groaning in protest, and made my way up the cracked stone path. The door creaked as I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and the scent of old wood. The interior was a snapshot of the past, untouched for decades. Faded wallpaper, antique furniture, and an air of abandonment permeated the rooms. As I walked through the house, I felt a presence, a whisper of movement just beyond the corner of my eye. It was as if the walls themselves were watching me. In the living room, I found a dusty piano with sheet music still laid out, as if someone had left in a hurry. A portrait of a young woman hung above the mantel, her eyes following me as I moved. It was Clara. Her beauty was striking, but there was a sadness in her eyes that sent shivers down my spine. As I studied the portrait, I noticed something peculiar, a small, faded photograph tucked into the corner of the frame. My heart raced as I pulled it out. The photograph was of Clara and me, standing together in the garden of this very house. She had her arm around my waist, and we were both smiling, a picture of happiness. The date on the back read June 15th, 1924. My hands trembled as I held the photograph, the weight of the mystery pressing down on me. What connection did I have to Clara Hartfield, and why was I appearing in these photographs from a time long before I was born? As I stood there, lost in thought, I heard a soft, melodic humming coming from upstairs. My blood ran cold. The house had been empty for decades. There was no one else here. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I climbed the staircase, each step creaking under my weight. The humming grew louder, clearer, and I recognized the tune. It was the same song from the sheet music on the piano. At the top of the stairs, I followed the sound to a small bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, the humming stopped abruptly. The room was empty, save for a large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, and my reflection was barely visible. I wiped the surface with my sleeve, revealing my face staring back at me, but there was something else, another figure standing just behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there, a shadowy silhouette, watching me. Its eyes were dark and hollow, and a chill ran down my spine. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move, but a soft, echoing voice filled the room. "You must remember," it said. "You must find the truth." Before I could respond, the figure vanished, leaving me alone in the room. I felt a strange compulsion to search the house further, to uncover whatever secrets it held. I rifled through drawers, opened closets, and sifted through boxes in the attic. Finally, I found an old diary hidden beneath the loose floorboard in Clara's bedroom. The diary detailed Clara's life, her hopes, and her fears. It spoke of a great love, a man she had met and fallen for deeply. The entries grew darker as she wrote of strange occurrences, shadowy figures, and whispers in the night. She described feeling watched, haunted by something she couldn't explain. The final entry was a plea for help, a desperate cry to whoever might find her words. As I read the last page, a cold wind blew through the room, rustling the curtains. I looked up, and for a moment, I saw Clara standing by the window, her eyes filled with sorrow and fear. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Then, she was gone. The weight of her words and the terror in her eyes stayed with me as I left the house. Clara's ghost was trapped, her soul bound by the unresolved mysteries of her past. And somehow, I was connected to it all. As I walked back home, I knew I couldn't rest until I uncovered the truth. The photographs, the haunting, the inexplicable connection, I had to find the answers, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery of Clara Hartfield consumed my every waking moment. My apartment had become a labyrinth of photographs, newspaper clippings, and hastily scribbled notes. I was losing sleep, my mind constantly racing with questions. Each new photograph that appeared only deepened the enigma. They showed me at different ages, sometimes as a child, sometimes an adult, but always with Clara or in places I had never been. One evening, as I was poring over old maps in the hopes of finding another clue, a sharp knock echoed through my apartment. I opened the door to find a middle-aged woman standing there, her face pale and anxious. "Are you Alex Turner?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, that's me," I replied, my curiosity piqued. "My name is Margaret Fields." "I need to talk to you about Clara Hartfield," she said, her eyes darting around as if she were afraid of being watched. I invited her in, and she wasted no time explaining. "Clara was my great-grandmother," she began. "My family has been haunted by her ghost for generations. My mother told me stories of Clara appearing in our home, always silent, always sorrowful. We believe she's trying to communicate something important, but we could never understand what." Margaret's revelation was both a relief and a new source of anxiety. I wasn't alone in this strange connection, but it also meant that Clara's haunting was more than just a series of coincidences. "Do you know why she appears in these photographs with me?" I asked, showing her the latest one that had turned up in my mailbox. Margaret's eyes widened as she looked at the photograph. "It's you," she whispered. "You're the one she was in love with." My mother always said that Clara's greatest love vanished mysteriously, and she spent the rest of her life searching for him. She wrote about him in her diary, calling him the one who disappeared. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. Could it be true? Was I somehow the reincarnation of Clara's lost love, or was there something more supernatural at play? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more unbelievable than the last. Determined to find answers, Margaret and I decided to visit Clara's grave. Perhaps there, we could find a way to communicate with her spirit. The cemetery was old and overgrown, the headstones weathered and covered in moss. We found Clara's grave easily. It was marked by a tall, ornate tombstone that seemed to stand out among the others. As we stood before it, a sudden chill ran through me, and the air grew heavy with an unspoken presence. We lit candles and laid out some of Clara's favorite flowers, hoping to create a peaceful atmosphere. Margaret began to speak softly, recounting the stories passed down through her family, while I placed the photographs around the grave. The wind picked up, swirling the leaves around us, and a faint whisper seemed to emanate from the tombstone. I closed my eyes, focusing on the connection I felt with Clara. "Clara," I called out softly, "we're here to help you. Please, show us what we need to know." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble, and a cold mist rose from the earth. Through the haze, Clara's ghostly figure appeared, her face more sorrowful than ever. She reached out to me, her eyes pleading, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "Remember," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of leaves. "You must remember." As she spoke, images flooded my mind, flashes of a past life, a love that transcended time, and a dark force that had torn us apart. I saw Clara and myself in another era, our love pure and true, but overshadowed by a shadowy figure that seemed to be stalking us. The figure's face was obscured, but its presence was palpable, a malevolent force that sought to keep us apart. When the vision ended, Clara's figure began to fade, and I felt a crushing sense of loss. "Wait!" I cried out. "How do I stop this? How do I free you?" Her form wavered, and with one last look of sorrow, she vanished into the mist. The candles flickered and went out, leaving Margaret and me standing in the dark, alone with the weight of what we had just witnessed. "We need to find out who that shadowy figure is," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "It's the key to all of this." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The answers were out there, buried in the past, and I was determined to uncover them. For Clara, for myself, and for the love that had transcended time, I had to confront the darkness that haunted us and find a way to set her spirit free. Margaret and I spent the next few days digging through every piece of information we could find. Clara's diary, old family records, newspaper archives, anything that might shed light on the shadowy figure from my visions. Our search led us to an old legend, a tale of a malevolent spirit that haunted the Hartfield family, a dark force known only as the Wraith of the Forgotten. The Wraith, as the legend went, was a vengeful spirit bound to the Hartfield bloodline, feeding on their sorrow and despair. It was said to have been a jealous lover of Clara's, driven mad by her rejection and ultimately cursed by a local witch. The curse bound the Wraith to Clara and her descendants, ensuring that none of them would find peace. My presence in Clara's photographs suggested that the curse extended beyond just her bloodline, pulling me into its web of torment. Armed with this knowledge, Margaret and I knew we had to confront the Wraith directly. We gathered everything we thought might help: Clara's diary, the photographs, and a few old charms passed down through Margaret's family. Our destination was the old Hartfield mansion, a place we believed held the key to ending the curse once and for all. The mansion loomed ahead, its decrepit facade barely visible through the thick fog that had settled in. We approached cautiously, the weight of history pressing down on us. Inside, the air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the creak of the floorboards under our feet. The house was a labyrinth of darkened rooms and shadowy corners, each one filled with the echoes of the past. We made our way to the heart of the house, an ornate parlor that seemed to have been untouched by time. In the center of the room stood a grand mirror, its surface covered in dust. The mirror seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as if it were a portal to another world. We knew instinctively that this was where we would face the Wraith. Margaret and I laid out the photographs in a circle around the mirror, each one showing a different moment in time, a different piece of the puzzle. As we did, the air grew colder, and the room darkened as if a storm were gathering overhead. We lit candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Clara," I called out, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "We're here to end this. Show us how." The mirror's surface rippled, and Clara's ghostly form appeared within it. Her eyes were filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. "The Wraith must be confronted," she said, her voice echoing through the room. Only then can we be free. A cold wind swept through the parlor, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. The air crackled with energy, and the wraith emerged from the shadows, a towering figure cloaked in darkness. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its presence filled the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. "You cannot escape me," the wraith hissed, its voice a guttural snarl. "I am bound to you, and you to me." Margaret and I stood our ground, the fear threatening to consume us. "We're not here to escape," I said, my voice steady. "We're here to end this." Clara's image in the mirror began to glow, her light pushing back the darkness. "The curse was born of hatred and despair," she said. "But love can break it. You must remember, Alex. Remember our love." As she spoke, memories flooded my mind, flashes of a life lived long ago, moments of joy and sorrow, of love and loss. I remembered Clara, our life together, and the tragedy that had torn us apart. The wraith had thrived on our pain, but our love was stronger. I stepped forward, facing the wraith. "I remember," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "Our love is stronger than your hatred." The wraith roared in anger, its form flickering and wavering. The photographs around the mirror began to glow, their light joining with Clara's. The room filled with a brilliant light, pushing back the darkness and enveloping the wraith. "No," the wraith screamed, its voice fading as the light consumed it. "You cannot defeat me." But defeat it we did. The light grew brighter, and the wraith's form dissolved into nothingness. The oppressive weight lifted from the room, replaced by a sense of peace and calm. Clara's form stepped out of the mirror, her face serene. "Thank you," she said softly. "You have freed me." Tears filled my eyes as I reached out to her. "I'm so sorry for everything," I whispered. She smiled, a look of pure love in her eyes. "You have nothing to be sorry for. We are free now, and our love will always endure." With those final words, Clara's form faded, leaving behind a sense of peace and closure. Margaret and I stood in silence, the weight of the past lifted from our shoulders. The curse was broken, and Clara's spirit was finally at rest. As we left the mansion, the fog lifted, and the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. I felt a sense of renewal, a new beginning. The photographs had vanished, their purpose fulfilled. Clara's story, our story, had finally reached its end, and with it came a new sense of peace. The end. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.